We're here. So I thank you guys all for tuning in. So today is just going to be an overview of MOB and safety equipment. Thank you to Landfall Navigation for running this. It'll be run by Mark Bologna. It's going to be from, just want to let you guys know, as it was in the invitation, Mark is going to be running it from the store where he can demonstrate some things he has on the table and stuff like that. So introductions, my name's Lou Ruggalo. I'm the fleet captain and the education chair with Raritan Yacht Club. And organizers, Mark, you want to introduce yourself? Actually, yeah. Before you do that, Mark, so my education committee is Paul Suzdak. He's also the membership chair, and Adam Inea is also on the education committee, and they were a big help in organizing this whole thing. So go ahead, Mark.
So I'm Captain Mark Bologna from Landfall. If you're not familiar with Landfall, we are a marine safety outfitter in Stamford, Connecticut, with our primary focus on offshore sailing. Okay, can everybody see me all right?
Hi.
Oh, so good morning, and thank you for joining us. Again, I'm Captain Mark Bologna from Landfall. With this presentation, my intent is not to petrify you into thinking that if you don't have all of this equipment or all of this stuff on board, that you're putting yourself or your family or your loved ones in grave danger. However, what I do primarily talk about is the bad things that can go wrong on a boat and bad situations, and how to overcome them and how to mitigate a bad problem. So when it comes to your safety equipment, your personal choice is key. And the reason I say that is because people will ask myself or us at Landfall on the phone when they call, or at boat shows, something that we prefer or a certain piece of equipment, but that piece of equipment has to work for you. So that's why I say it's your personal choice, which really takes precedent. And keep in mind that each boat, each crew, and each situation is different. So along those lines, the first thing you want to do is know your equipment that you carry on the boat and know its capabilities. Okay, and know how it works. Now I'm going to use a term, it's an acronym that predates World War II. Okay, we used to use this term a lot in a shop that I used to work in many years ago. And if you worked in the engineering field or if you're in the armed services, I know you've heard this term. Okay, it's an acronym, and I'm going to keep it clean because we're in mixed company. But that acronym is RTFM, and it stands for Read the Friggin' Manual. You're going to hear me say that quite a few times during this presentation. So keeping your safety equipment in good working order, because U.S. Coast Guard incident reports show a cascading chain of events that usually leads to a problem. Okay, and in the case of, say, cruising couples, an example of that is that the primary person that runs the boat or sails the boat falls overboard or goes down from a medical emergency and is incapacitated. Now it's somebody who's thrust into the position of having to run or sail the boat that's not as familiar with the person who just, say, fell overboard. So what I'm going to cover is PFDs and life jackets. I'm going to use that term interchangeably. Man overboard equipment and procedures, gear you should have on your person, and electronic signaling devices. So as far as PFDs go, there's something that has come to the forefront when it comes to inflatable PFDs, and that we're realizing through safety at sea seminars and interactions with customers that a lot of very experienced sailors are not familiar with how their inflatable PFD works. And in my opinion, your PFD or your life jacket is about the most important piece of safety equipment that you can have on the boat. Now, I know of several experienced offshore sailors and navigators who have told me that, and circumnavigators, I apologize, that have told me if they know the boat's going down, if they know the boat's going to sink, either through an onboard fire they can't get out, a flooding situation they can't control, in lieu of their inflatable PFD, they would take that off and don a Type 1 SOLAS PFD. Okay, SOLAS meaning safety of life at sea. It's an international standard. It's got a lot of buoyancy. It's got reflective tape. It's got a buddy line that you can tether several occupants in the water together to keep you together in a group. And it's got a whistle on it. It's an excellent PFD. Does exactly what it's supposed to do. It'll write an unconscious victim face up, provides them plenty of buoyancy. The problem with a life jacket like that is you can't wear something that's this bulky while you're on deck. Okay, it's just too big, it's too hot, you can't move around in it. That is the reason why myself and many of us will use inflatable PFDs. So when it comes to inflatable PFDs, again, I get a lot of confusion with very experienced sailors and boaters as to how they work and what they can do for you. They come in several configurations. They come manual, automatic, and hydrostatic. Now, when it comes to a manual PFD, some of the confusion I hear from people is they think you have to manually blow into a tube like this and inflate the life jacket, and that is not the case. With a manual PFD, there is a lever that is attached to the pull toggle. That lever actuates a pin, punctures a CO2 bottle, and inflates the life jacket like that. Automatic PFDs, okay, and here again, I get a lot of confusion with automatic and hydrostatic PFDs. Automatic life jackets work on a water-soluble, either a bobbin, it looks like that, or a capsule, or a pill, or a tablet, or an aspirin, some people call it. And what happens is when you fall in the water, this cellulose substance that's inside of these will dissolve. And because it's compressing a spring, and that spring can now expand because this is dissolved, that spring expands, punctures a CO2 bottle, and inflates the life jacket just like that. This all happens very quickly. Hydrostatic PFDs work on a hydrostatic release. This is where I get a lot of confusion, where people think their life jacket may be hydrostatic or automatic. A hydrostatic PFD uses a hydrostatic release like this. When you fall in the water, this unit has to go below 4 inches of water. Once it dips below 4 inches, it senses the water pressure. There's a plunger in here that allows the water to flood in, and it dissolves a plug of that cellulose material. And that is what inflates a hydrostatic PFD. Now, the easiest way I can explain the difference between hydrostatic and automatic is if you took your dock hose and you hosed off your automatic PFD, it would inflate it. If you got it wet enough, it'll inflate an automatic PFD because that water is going to work its way into the mechanism, dissolve that cellulose, and inflate the life jacket. It will not inflate a hydrostatic PFD because there's not enough hydrostatic water pressure or depth of water to make that life jacket go off. So annual maintenance on inflatable PFDs. And again, one of the things that I run into is people believe that they can buy an inflatable life jacket and maintain it like a foam life jacket, where they believe that they can buy it, they can purchase it, leave it in the boat, leave it there for 10 years, never inspect it, never look at it, and in an emergency, think that it's going to work for them. And in many cases, it won't if you don't go through this maintenance process and make sure it's going to work for you. So one of the things I'll ask when I'm doing this live in front of a group is I'll ask them how many people annually inspect an inflatable PFD that they use. And usually 1/2 to 3/4 of the hands go up. I'd like to see all the hands go up, but usually it's about 1/2 to 3/4 of the folks that will actually go through and check their inflatable PFD at least annually. So what you want to do and the first thing you want to do when you're inspecting your inflatable is open it up and blow into the oral inflation tube. And I'm going to show you on mine. I've got about a dozen of these. So what I'll do is I'll use a compressor, okay? And I'll use a compressor to inflate the life jacket. And you simply do that by just holding the compressor on the oral inflation. And like I said, I've got about a dozen of them, so I'll do them all at once like that. You can use the oral inflation tube and just exhale into it and inflate it that way. So the reason you're doing that is you're pressure testing the bladder, because if the bladder is compromised and there's something wrong with it, the rest of these steps are going to be a moot point. So you want to make sure that the bladder is not compromised and it's holding air. Now, some of the examples that I've seen, personally with inflatable PFDs, that things can go wrong with them. All right, now I have a good friend of mine. Um, he's a customer, but he's also a good friend of mine, and he is notoriously frugal. Okay, I'm not going to mention his name, obviously, but I will tell you this: his frugality is to the point where the last time he took money out of his pocket, the president squinted because it hadn't seen daylight in so long. Okay, so knowing what I know with his frugality, he brought in his life jacket and he wanted me to show him how to rearm it. And I asked him, I said, did you inflate it first? Because if you didn't, you're throwing good money after bad by putting a rearm kit in a life jacket that the bladder is not going to hold air. So he had his PFD out in his car, went out and got it, blew into the tube, brought it back into the store, placed it on the counter, and he said, watch this. And when he pressed on the bladder, all the air blew out of the oral inflation tube. And the reason that happened was on older PFDs, they didn't heat seal the tube to the bladder. They used an adhesive, and over time that adhesive breaks down. And if you don't inspect and pressure test it, you won't know that that's a problem. So that bladder was compromised. There's nothing you can do to seal this. You can't put marine sealant or Permatex or anything on there to seal it. If you have a hole in it, you have to get a new one because you can't patch or repair it. Another instance, I had a customer bring in life jacket very similar to this one. It looked like it was in great shape. Okay. He asked me to inflate it with a compressor. He had two of them. I inflated it. After about an hour, it had deflated. There was no air left in it. And I was curious about that because it looked like it was in very good condition and it looked like he maintained it very well. I brought that life jacket home, inflated it again with a compressor, put it in a bathtub, submerged it, and a bubble trail came out of the bladder. So that person had somehow punctured the bladder and compromised that bladder to the point where you couldn't see it with the naked eye and it wouldn't hold air for an hour. So something to be aware of. The next thing you want to do once you pressure tested the bladder and you know it's sound and holding air or CO2, check the CO2 bottle. I have had inflatable PFDs come back with a CO2 bottle is so rusted, it's fused to the inflator and you can't back it out. Okay, so you don't want to see rust on the CO2 bottle. The other problem is that CO2 bottle now is inside your PFD and it's abrading the bladder with rust on it. So you don't want to have rust on the CO2 bottle. Check the foil seal on the top of the CO2 bottle. Okay, make sure the foil seal isn't compromised. I've opened up inflatable life jackets and found a pinhole in the CO2 bottle. If you have a pinhole in the CO2 bottle, there's no CO2 in it. That's going to be a problem because it's not going to have any CO2 to activate the life jacket. So along the lines of CO2 bottles, okay, certain manufacturers will send the inflatable PFDs to the manufacturer, to the retailer without the CO2 bottles installed. And the reason they do that is wise guys will go through large retail stores and pull the manual releases. And I think it's funny to inflate the life jackets while they're on the rack. So some of the manufacturers send them to you. Now, again, if you RTFM and read the friggin' manual, they put a big placard on that packaging saying, this is not a working life jacket until you install the CO2 bottle. The reason I mention that is I had a customer bring in a 10-year inflatable PFD he had been wearing single-handed sailing. And he wanted me to show him how to rearm it. I went in the back, I went to get him a rearm kit, opened up the life jacket, and there was no CO2 bottle installed. So that would have been a real problem if this gentleman went overboard and he single-handed without a CO2 bottle installed in his PFD. However, in his defense, if he'd known how that life jacket works, okay, and he had fallen overboard and it's not going to inflate because there's no CO2 bottle in it, and he could pull the manual release all day long, that's not going to inflate it because there's no CO2 installed. However, he could have opened it up, grabbed the inflation tube and started exhaling and blowing into this to give himself some buoyancy, keep his head above water until he could get rescued. Okay. So on an automatic inflatable PFD now, you want to inspect, the next thing is inspect the bobbin. Okay. Make sure the bobbin has the ridges on it. There are little ridges or saw teeth on these bobbins. Make sure that material is not starting to break down or degrade. And you can also tap that on a hard surface lightly. And if any of that material starts to flake off or break off, it's time to replace the bobbin and more than likely the entire rearm kit. Now, if your life jacket uses a capsule like this, okay, there is not much you can do to inspect it. There's nothing to see in there as an indicator, but you can't see the material in there. So they stamp a date on these, which is a replace by date. Okay, and again, RTFM, read the manual, that'll tell you when to replace the capsule on your inflatable PFD. Now, one of the complaints I get with automatic firing life jackets, okay, the water soluble type, is people will say, I was sitting on the rail and we got hit with a wave and the life jacket inflated, right? And the reason that's happening is because most of the time, the bobbin or the capsule or the pill is already starting to degrade and break down. So what people do is they wear it, they get it wet, they keep it in the boat, they throw it down in the compartment, and the water that they got on the life jacket starts to wick its way up in the mechanism and starts to break down the bobbin or the capsule. Then they'll go out on the rail or they'll go out on a day when the weather's real foul, a lot of rain, and they get just enough water on there to inflate the life jacket. So the way to alleviate that is if you have an automatic, hang it up when you're done with it. Okay, by hanging it up, you can hang it up in the boat. That allows the moisture and the humidity to work its way away from the mechanism and not up into it. Okay, if you can take it off the boat, all the better. If you have a damp boat in a humid climate, take it off the boat, bring it home, hang it up in a dry, cool environment, and that will make the bobbins last much longer. So on the hydrostatic type of inflators, okay, these have a date stamped on them. Okay, again, you're going to read the manual, and there's a date stamped on the hydrostatic inflator that tells you it's a replace by date. That's a 5-year date that they tell you to replace the inflator. I've had customers that have these, the indicator is still green, but it's 2 years out of date. And they'll say to me, well, do I need to replace it? Okay, it's still green. The answer is yes. Okay, I'm certainly not going to risk my life on a $75 rearm kit to think that it might work, okay, because the indicator's green. If that date says to replace it, that's when you should replace that unit. And remember, even though it has a 5-year service life, okay, you only have to replace that hydrostatic release 5 years. You still want to check the bladder to make sure the bladder doesn't have a problem, because this may work fine, but if the bladder's compromised, it's not going to hold air. It's not going to keep you buoyant. All inflatable life jackets, according to the manufacturer, have a service life of 7 to 10 years. Okay, they don't last indefinitely. I take very good care of mine. I maintain them. I've got some that are 15 years old that are in very good shape and still hold air. Right, but the manufacturers say 7 to 10 years. And the reason I bring that up is every time I do one of these, somebody will ask, well, how long should my life jacket last? And the answer is ambiguous because it depends on how you use it. If you're a commercial mariner, if you're a competitive sailor and you beat up on your equipment, because that's the nature of how you use the boat, what you're doing, they won't last as long. Okay, if you're a recreational boater and you maintain it, take care of it, you'll get 10 or 12, 15 years out of it. So it all depends on how you use it. Strobe lights are a real good idea to have on your life jackets. Now, whether you put one on if you choose to use foam life jackets, put a strobe light on your life jacket. In this case, what people will do with an inflatable is they'll put a strobe light on the inside of the life jacket. In this case, this is a strobe light here up on the shoulder. Okay, and I get pushback from people when I mention that to them, because they'll tell me, well, I'm a day boater or a day sailor. We're not out after dark. And there's a couple of things that I think are wrong with that. One, you may not expect to be out after dark. Okay, you may have a grounding. You may have a problem with the boat, an engine problem. You may be helping somebody else that's got a problem, and you may be out after dark on the water. Okay, and it's always a good idea to have a strobe light on. Along the lines of strobe lights, some of these strobe lights are water activated, okay, which in theory sounds like a really good idea. And I like water activated strobe lights. However, some of them are too sensitive to put inside of a inflatable PFD. In the case of this one, that's all the moisture it takes to switch that strobe light on. So now what happens is you've got this type of strobe light inside your PFD, okay? And you get some moisture or humidity in there, and it's going to switch it on. It's going to start strobing, and it's going to kill the battery. So a couple of ones that I like, and I've tested these, is this one is by a company called UST. Okay, the contacts on this water activated strobe light are on top. This one here is by a company called Aquaspec. It's a little tiny Solus approved strobe light. These things are about $20. The contacts on these, both of these lights are far enough apart that they will not switch on for moisture or humidity. I've tried it. I've sprayed them with a plant sprayer. They don't switch on. They only switch on when you dunk them. So this is a better choice, that if you're going to keep it packed inside of an inflatable life jacket, it's not going to switch on and start strobing when you don't want to. I want to mention, don't tie a strobe light on the outside of the PFD, inflatable PFD like this, okay? Years ago, when I first started doing this, we were doing the Safety at Sea seminar at the Naval Academy in Annapolis. And one of the fellas during the pool exercise had his strobe light tied on the back of his inflatable like this with a cord wrapped around the bladder. And I mentioned to him that that's not a good place to put your strobe light, because when the life jacket opens up, it's going to be behind you and not where you expect it and think it's going to be. Well, he barked at me and told me how many years he had been sailing and so on and so forth. And I said, you know, that's your choice. I'm not the search and rescue guys. They're the people that are looking for you. So needless to say, when he got into the pool, okay, and he had all his foul weather gear on, because it's part of the exercise. You have all your foul weather gear on, you have an inflatable life jacket on, and you simulate boarding a life raft. He got in the pool, the life jacket inflated. Now I thought the way that he wrapped the cord around the life jacket might cause the life jacket to burst. It didn't. But what happened was the cord unraveled, and the strobe light was dangling down behind him, illuminating the bottom of the pool, which is really good for attracting squid, but not so much for attracting search and rescue. All right, so don't tie it on the outside of the bladder, because what's going to happen is once a life jacket opens up and inflates, anything you have on the outside of that inflatable life jacket will now be behind you. So a whistle is something else that you want to check when you're looking at your PFD. Right? Again, this is a Type 1 Solus. They come with a whistle on them. Okay, you should have a whistle already packed in your inflatable. If you don't, put a whistle in there. Right? It's a good idea to have a whistle on it. The reason being is that if you start choking on water, you start to ingest water, you can still blow a whistle. Okay, and if you're becoming hypothermic, you can still blow a whistle. And you can hear a whistle a lot further than a person's voice yelling for help. So I want to reference an article. This was several years ago. Okay, it's called Man Overboard Miracle. This was about a sailor named Mark Wheeler. This was from August 2017. Mark Wheeler was participating in the Chicago Mac race on a vessel named Meridian X. And the water temperature in Lake Michigan at the time was 65 degrees. Now, again, I want to emphasize that this fellow here was a competent sailor. Okay, he was a former F-14 Tomcat pilot, so he knew his stuff. And what had happened to Mark Wheeler was their drill to prep the boat if there was a problem was the crew members up on deck would stomp on the top of the deck, and that would summon the crew members who were off watch to come up and help them prep the boat for whatever the problem was. The problem was they were going to get hit with a squall in the middle of the night. I think it was midnight, or maybe 2 a.m., somewhere in there. Pitch dark, Lake Michigan, they're going to get hit with a squall. The guys on deck stomp on the deck. People from off watch from below come up. Mark Wheeler grabs his PFD, puts one arm through it, puts the other arm through it, comes up the companionway and goes to his position on the boat. Notice I said he didn't buckle, or I didn't say he buckled the PFD. Okay, so he's got the PFD looped around his shoulders. They get hit with a wave, the boat gets knocked down, and he gets shot through the lifelines head first into the water. Now, to his advantage, several crew members saw him go overboard. Okay, but they said it was odd because he didn't make a sound as he went through the lifelines. He goes into the water, his life jacket inflates, but he didn't buckle it. Okay, remember what I said before about a cascading chain of events is what leads to a problem or a fatality. In his case, he had to hold the life jacket like this with both arms, okay, because he didn't want to slip through it. Okay, and he stated he didn't think that he would last more than 10 minutes in the water without the life jacket. He also had a brand new strobe light with a fresh battery on it. He said it began to falter and quit working almost immediately. So I wasn't there. I don't know if he didn't have it, if he didn't seal the bezel and the O-ring and get a good seal on it when he replaced the battery. Water could have got in there, fried the board. So now we got a man that's in the water. Nobody can see him because there's no strobe light going. Okay. The boat was estimated 2 miles away from him. Okay. But what saved him, and they did recover this man, but what saved him was he had a $2 whistle inside of his life jacket. And that whole time he was blowing that whistle like crazy, and they were able to hear it. They couldn't see him, but they could hear the whistle. One of the problems was that when they got the boat stopped after 2 miles, got the sails down and were able to start heading back to him. Okay. They had to motor back to him. So they had to keep shutting the engine down so they could hear that faint whistle, which took them much longer to get back to this gentleman. And like I said, they did recover him, but a $2 whistle was what saved his life, that he was able to grab out of the life jacket. If this is your primary PFD on board, okay, which a lot of people it is, okay, they have a pack of these that comes with a Coast Guard package with a buy a boat, or most people have these on board. If this is your life jacket, put some reflective tape on this. Okay, at nighttime it's really hard to see it in the water. All right, so put some reflective tape on it. Okay, it's an inexpensive type tube. Put a strobe light and tie a whistle on it. Okay, if you have that pack of life jackets down below, make sure they're equipped with that. All right, with a whistle and a light and so on, and reflective tape. Reflective tape as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about a life sling. Okay, life sling is a man overboard recovery device that's like a collar. Okay, but life slings don't have a light or a whistle on them either. So if you have a life sling on board, put some reflective tape, put a light, and put a whistle on it. Again, if somebody's inside in one of these things using it, you're going to be able to hear and see them much easier. One of the other personal safety items that we get a lot of interaction with customers on are tethers. Okay. When I said in the beginning, personal preference is the key to this, tethers are a big thing where personal preference is key. And the reason I say that is a lot of these different tethers, they come in tons and tons of different configurations. Okay, this is one that used to be the old standby. All right, this type here. If you're familiar with this kind of hook on your tether, you will know that if you don't grip it right, it's got a pinch point on it, and it'll pinch you right in the palm, and you get a lovely blood blister on the inside of your palm for the rest of your race or your cruise. So these hooks are very difficult to use for people with smaller, weaker hands. They take a lot of pressure to open and close. It's got this tab on it that sometimes gets hooked or caught on things when you're trying to release it from a jack line or pad eye. Some of these hooks that are out today that are anodized aluminum, okay, much easier to use. So one of the problems with tethers is that a lot of times when people crew on race boats, the boat or the owner or the skipper will provide tethers for them. And if they have that kind of hook that you don't like, you're going to be very reluctant to use it. It's going to become drudgery. You're not going to want to use that piece of equipment. So if that's the case, find yourself a tether that you can manipulate, that you like using, and that you're going to make sure you use. One of the things with tethers that we found in a lot of these seminars is there have been sailors who have been killed as they come up the companionway and there's no attachment point. So try to have an attachment point at the top of the companionway before the individual comes on deck. Okay, whether it's a pad eye or a piece of jack line or something, so that before you're even up on deck, you can get attached and clipped onto the boat. Because there have been quite a few sailors who have started to make their way up the companionway, and either a wave or they get knocked down and they get shot right out of the companionway and overboard and lost that way. So make sure you have an attachment point there. Something else I want to point out on these tethers is this one has a snap shackle on it. Okay, and the reason for the snap shackle is so that you can release out of that tether. I'm not sure if you can see this on camera, but you can release that snap shackle when it's under a load. So if you're being dragged by the boat, if you got knocked overboard and you're being dragged by the boat, you can release out of this if you have to, because that may be a choice for your survival, is to break free from the boat if you're being dragged and slammed up against the side of the boat and being drowned. You can imagine a hook similar to this, okay? And this is on your harness, and you've gone overboard. It is going to be nearly impossible, other than cutting it, to be able to release this and back this around and get it undone when it's under a load. So along the lines of cutting your tether as a means of release, I'm not a big fan of that. I think it's probably one of the worst options, is to think that you're going to use a knife or a cutter to release yourself from your tether. So this is a fairly new PFD from Spinlock, and it's just called a Vito. It's a hydrostatic release. They make another one called a 6D now. It used to 5D used to be this old standby. They now have the 6D. Okay, the Vito and the 6D have something called HRS system. It stands for harness release system. And underneath, I don't know if you can see that on camera, but underneath the harness loop, there is a blue pull tab right here. Okay, so if you choose to use a tether that you cow hitch or luggage tag to your harness, right? And that's, some sailors prefer that because they don't have the stainless steel clanking around. It cuts down on some of the weight on the boat. If you have a luggage tag to this or a cow hitch, when you pull that blue pull tab, that harness release system, this harness loop breaks away. Okay, and it can be repacked, right? So it's not one-time use only. But that harness loop drops away, and that allows you to break free from the vessel. There was fairly recently a British sailor, sad to say, was drowned when he went overboard, and nobody saw him go overboard. And about an hour into this mishap, someone on deck noticed that there was a tether drooping over the lifelines. And what had happened was he went overboard, nobody saw him, and he got dragged and drowned because he didn't release out of the tether, or he couldn't release out of it. And that sailor perished. So make sure you've got a way, if you have to be able to release or get out of that tether. So along the lines of cutting yourself free, everyone should have a knife on. In a lot of offshore races, it's a regulation. So everyone should carry a knife on, and preferably not this particular one, but I'm showing you this because it's got a sheep's foot or a blunt end. Okay, this way, when working around, obviously around yourself, you don't want to jab yourself with your knife. You don't want to puncture an inflatable life jacket or inflatable life raft. So it's preferable to have a knife that has a sheep's foot or a blunt end. Now, I prefer a knife. Now, this is not my boat knife. Okay, this one has a point on it. My boat knife is blunt, but I have one knife that I keep that is strictly for safety. I don't do any rigging with it. It's in my pocket. It's extremely sharp. I make sure it's sharpened quite often, and I don't use it for anything other than if I had to cut myself or somebody else free of something. All right, but The thing I like about these particular knives, Spyderco makes these, is that it has a thumb loop and I can open it one-handed. So this way, if I'm holding onto the boat, okay, and for some reason I have to get to my knife, I've got one hand for the boat, one hand for the task, I can open my knife one-handed and I can cut myself free or use it that way. That's what that loop is on the back of the blade for. Okay, and I can also open this knife with gloves on as well. So I like the kind that has a thumb loop on it. Remember, your knife is a tool and not a weapon, okay? That all depends on who's on board with you and how long you've been there with them on the boat. But basically, it's a tool and not a weapon. Waterproof flashlights are something you should have on you, okay? And the reason I like to have a waterproof flashlight on my person, either in my pocket or in a sheath, is if somebody goes overboard, it's much easier for me to be able to grab one of these tactical flashlights. All right, this is by a company called PowerTac. These are tactical waterproof flashlights. All right, they're not cheap, but they're very good and they're LED and they're about 1,000 lumens. So this way, if somebody goes overboard, I don't have to go back to the helmet and look for the handheld spotlight. As soon as somebody yells man overboard, I can hit them with a tactical light, okay, and find them in the water, because these things are great for lighting up reflective tape on a life jacket. The other thing I like about these lights is that they have a 1,000 lumen backup strobe. So in that instance that I read to you about Mark Wheeler, okay, if he had something like this in his pocket, right, I'm not going to shine this in the camera. I don't know how impressive that is on the camera, but this has a 1,000 lumen backup strobe light. So if I were to be the victim and the person in the water and my strobe light quit, I can use this as a backup strobe light to signal people on the boat so that they know where I am in the water. So some of the electronic signaling devices, I get a ton of confusion between AIS units and personal locator beacons. Okay, so I'm going to try to break it down so that everybody understands the difference between the two. AIS units notify the vessel, or any vessel within 4 to 5 miles is basically the range. Okay? This is one type of AIS unit. Okay, and what you do is on an inflatable PFD, you can attach that to the oil inflation tube. There's a ribbon that goes around the tube, okay? And when the life jacket expands, it puts tension on that ribbon and will open up the antenna and start it broadcasting, right? Now, the reason I say this is all on a mechanical aspect, it all works if the life jacket inflates. Going back to maintaining your life jacket, if your life jacket doesn't inflate, this isn't going to switch on. Okay? It's not automatic. It's not water activated. It doesn't have a mercury switch in it. If it goes horizontal, it switches it on. This is all activated by the inflation of your PFD. So if your PFD doesn't inflate, okay, you should have RTFM and read the friggin' manual and know how to turn this on manually in case you get in a jam. You fall overboard and the life jacket didn't open up, you got to know where the bursting tabs are or a way to access the oil inflation tube, and you got to know how to switch this on manually so that you can get it broadcasting back to the boat so that they know somebody's in the water. A fellow who didn't do that was by the name of Andrew Taylor. And I got to sit in years ago in a webinar by this gentleman. Andrew Taylor was participating in the Clipper Round the World Rally. Okay. And what happened to Andrew Taylor was he had this unit, which is a McMurdo S20 in his pocket. He got washed overboard in the North Pacific. Okay. I want to say one other thing about Andrew Taylor. Andrew Taylor is the first person to tell you he was an idiot because he didn't read the manual and know how this thing worked. So he got washed over in the North Pacific, cold water. Okay. His life jacket inflated. Great. Reached into his pocket, pulled out his S20, deployed the antenna, switched it on. It started beeping and flashing. And he thought, great, they're going to rescue me. They know I'm in the water. Except for the fact that the boat kept sailing and sailing and sailing until it was almost out of range of his unit and out of eyesight. He decided it would be a good idea to turn the unit off and back on again. And when he did that, he saw the boat start to turn and start to head back in his direction. Okay. What happened to Andrew Taylor was when he initially turned this unit on, through that series of beeps and flashes that he didn't read the manual on, the unit was telling him it hadn't acquired a satellite and it hadn't acquired a position fix, which meant it wasn't broadcasting his position in the water back to the boat. When he turned it off and turned it back on again, it rebooted, it got the satellites, and then started transmitting the man overboard distress signal back to the vessel. Now you can see on the cover here of this book, he was in the water so long that they had to lower somebody else into the water because he was hypothermic. He couldn't even help his own rescue. He couldn't grasp the halyard they were trying to hand down to him. So they had to put somebody else into the water. Now they recovered this man, and it's good that they did and wrote a book about it, right? But that's part of the thing I have with RTFM and reading the friggin' manual. So what happens when one of these AIS units switches on? Well, it's using a VHF radio signal, all right? It sends a signal back to the vessel. That puts a man overboard icon on your AIS unit or on your chart plot. Okay, so you can see the advantage of if somebody goes overboard, now you've got them marked on your chart plotter. You have to be able to disseminate what that man overboard icon looks like, though, because every chart plotter, it's different. Okay, so there may be a boat near you that gets that man overboard icon, but they have no idea what it means. On some units, such as the new Ray Marines, it'll actually have a guy in the water. It's a little icon with a guy in the water with his hands up like this, and it says man overboard underneath it. On some older chart plotters, it was nothing more than a triangle with an X through it. So if you see a triangle with an X through it pop up on your chart plotter and you're not sure what it means, then you're not going to be able to disseminate that information and know it's actually a man overboard. So the other thing that these units do, this particular one, okay, the McMurdo does AIS only, okay, and there's going to be a few acronyms in this conversation now. The McMurdo does AIS only, okay. The Ocean Signal MOB1 will also trip the DSC alarm on your VHF radio, okay, digital selective calling on the VHF radio. So when this unit is switched on, okay, it's transmitting a signal to the AIS or your chart plotter, and you'll also get a blaring alarm on your VHF radio with a DSC signal. So now you've got several different pieces of electronics that have this unit's latitude and longitude in it, because it's broadcasting through the GPS in this unit, your latitude and longitude, or this unit's position, back to those two pieces of electronics.
It looks like there's a question out there.
Okay, go ahead, shoot. I can't read it. If you could read it for me.
Okay. Basically, I had a question because from what I know, the AIS is working on the VHF band, and what you described, getting the satellite, while I understand that an AIS usually needs a GPS in order to give you location and speed, in my mind, and you're absolutely right, I didn't read the freaking manual. I do have two of those units. And the question is, why didn't the unit basically broadcast a man overboard onto the VHF channel? It's not predicted in my book on getting a GPS location. Just so they won't know where you are, but they will know that there's a man overboard.
He was using, so this one, that's what he had. So this one will only broadcast to the chart plotter. This doesn't go to the VHF radio.
Okay, so
this one,
what you're saying is that when you buy an AIS, you can't jump into conclusion that this works directly as a man overboard alarm or radio transmission to the VHF.
Correct.
It would be okay.
Right. It's dependent. It's dependent on the fact that, and again, here's some confusion I get at safety at sea seminars. People say, "Oh, these units don't go to a satellite." Well, they do, because they have to get your latitude and longitude. They're doing it through a GPS. So they still have to connect to a satellite to get the position. They're just not sending a distress signal to the satellite like this unit would, which is a personal locator beacon that I'm going to talk about now.
Yeah, I'm sorry. don't want to take too much of your time, obviously.
That's
So
okay.
yes, what you're saying is that there is no alarm that is an AIS on the market that basically when it's in the water and you activate it, it just immediately sends a man overboard alarm to everybody. Even it needs to get the GPS before that. I mean, all of them or just
Yes.
a few of them?
Yes. So in order to send that man overboard signal, it's got to link up to a satellite so that it can send that signal and tell them where you are.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
And in most cases, it works great. But again, you know, when you read the manual and you say, you know what, the boat's not turning, I better do something because I might have to reboot it so that they get the signal. So now again, the confusion I get between AIS units and personal locator beacons. So I went through basically how AIS units work. This is a personal locator beacon, okay, PLB, personal locator beacon. These work primarily in the same way that an EPIRB works. Okay? If you're familiar with the term EPIRB, right, emergency positioning indicating radio beacon. All right, this is for the vessel. Okay, when one of these is switched on, sends a signal to a series of satellites. Okay, and those satellites determine your position on the globe, and then determine who the response people are going to be. In U.S. waters, it's going to be the Coast Guard. Okay, foreign waters, it'll be, you know, the Bahamian authorities or wherever you are. But these things work globally. Right, so sends a signal to a series of satellites, GPS in it. They know where this unit is broadcasting from, and they send search and rescue people to look for it, or other vessels in some cases of what's called AMVIR. If you're far enough out at sea and they can't get quick response to you, they'll divert. What AMVIR is, it's a consortium of commercial shipping that volunteers to be a part of this, and they'll divert a commercial ship to your location. What a personal locator beacon does is much in the same thing with a couple of exceptions, okay? Personal locator beacons, the duration of the distress signal is less than on an EPIRB. So if you're going offshore, we always say, listen, if you're going offshore, get an EPIRB because it's gonna broadcast that distress signal for a much longer duration than a personal locator beacon. Personal locator beacons will broadcast a distress signal for 24 hours. Okay, another thing with a personal locator beacon is they are manual only. You have to switch this on. An EPIRB, if you place an EPIRB in the water, it has water contacts on it, it will switch on through the contact in the water automatically. PLBs will not do that. You have to switch it on. Personal locator beacons are registered to the individual, not the vessel. So that means you could take this with you hiking or camping or skiing, and you can take it from boat to boat. So this is not necessarily for one vessel. This is registered to the individual, and you can bring it along with you. I've had customers who were in, one fellow was in South America, and he said he wasn't comfortable with where he had to go, and he wanted to bring a personal locator beacon with him in his pocket in case there was trouble, and he could switch it on. I also remember an instance where there was a woman not too long ago in Hawaii, I think she broke her leg, and she was in the woods for a week while people were looking for her. These units are about $300. If she had one of these in her pocket, she could have switched this on, and they would have found where she was through the satellites, and certainly wouldn't have taken a week to find her. One of the questions I get is, why is there no combined unit? Why isn't there a unit that does AIS to the boat and distress to search and rescue? Okay, and the reason is the FCC won't allow it. The duration of the signal is governed by the FCC, and the battery technology in the US is not up to the FCC standard to have one unit that does both. It's in the pipeline, they're working on it, but it'll probably be years before there's a combined unit. So when people say to me, well, suppose I want to call search and rescue and I want to send a signal to the boat, you're going to have to get 2 units in the US. They've got them in Europe, but the US standard says that they're not going to allow it right now. So I'm going to go over a couple of things with man overboard quickly, okay? What do you do when someone falls overboard? Okay, you yell man overboard. I know it sounds a little silly, okay, especially in the case of cruising couples, there's only 2 of you on the boat. But the fact is that you may be near other boaters or say a mooring field or maybe somebody on shore that might have heard you yell man overboard. So if there's only 2 of you on board, somebody goes over the side, still yell man overboard very loudly, okay, and get other people's attention that can come to your assistance and aid in your recovery of that person. The next thing you do is throw flotation to the person in the water, okay, even if they're wearing a life jacket, all right? Get some flotation to them in the water. Seat cushions, I'm gonna go over some of these throwable things that you can get to somebody in the water, because the idea is to get a bigger debris field around them, okay? Looking for a person, even in a life jacket, a head in the water is very difficult to see, okay? And there's a lot of misconception about, you know, recovering a man overboard. People think that you're just gonna get the boat over to them and pull the person back. A lot of times it's very difficult, especially if the person's not wearing a PFD, to see just a head in the water, all right? So throw a bunch of flotation to them, give them something to float on, give them some additional debris around them so that they can be found in the water that way. Hit the man overboard button on the GPS, right? This way you've marked that person's position electronically, all right? So now you can use that man overboard position on the GPS to broadcast that to other people to help you as well. So now you've got their latitude and longitude marked through the MOB button on the GPS. And issue a radio call, okay? You can use that location now to issue a mayday on the radio if it's a mayday situation, all right? It's the middle of the night, you lost sight of the person, you're done right, it's a mayday. Get somebody there, get somebody to help you to recover that person that went overboard. And assign a pointer. Okay, now again, in the case of 2 people on board, you're not going to have this luxury. Okay, you're not going to have an extra crew person to be able to just point to the person in the water. But the idea with, if you have a crew, okay, and assigning a pointer is that that person never takes their eyes off the person in the water. And they should never, ever, not for a split second, stop looking at where that person is in the water. Now, I watched a video a while ago of an offshore race, and I'm sorry, I can't remember where it was. And there was a young man up on the bow of this fast race boat wearing all dark clothing. Okay, he had a pair of gray or carbon shorts and a carbon or gray top. Okay, no life jacket, slips right off the rail, off the side of the boat, and boom, goes right in the water. Okay, and this boat is moving. Now the pointer follows him and then turns around to say something to the person at the helm. Bad move. Guy in the water with all black on, and all you got is his head. They did recover this young fella, but don't ever take your eyes off the person in the water if you're the pointer. Okay, and like I said, if you're a cruising couple, that is a luxury you're not going to have. So again, in the case of cruising couples, now the person at the helm, you know, they've got a lot to do. All right, so I want to impress on you, you know, if you have a life jacket on and you fall overboard. Okay, now the person at the helm, who maybe not quite so used to running that boat, is basically recovering a person overboard. Okay, their head's above water, they're floating, they got a life jacket on. Now they don't have to go through these steps as rapidly as if they're trying to recover somebody that's starting to drown. Okay, and drowning can happen very quickly. All right, people, that's another misconception, is that people that, you know, I'm a good swimmer. Drowning can happen within a couple of minutes. So if the person that hits the water has got their life jacket on, now you can do this a little bit more methodically. You can get the sails down, you can get the boat turned around, you can make the radio call, get them flotation in the water, and it's not a drowning type of situation. You're just recovering a person in the water. So some of the things that you can use as throwable devices. Okay, this thing, I know the fellow that invented this personally. I met him years ago at a life jacket conference down in Florida. Real nice kid. Basically, this is the only U.S. Coast Guard approved Type 4 inflatable throwable. Okay, and what this is this works just like an inflatable life jacket. It's got a bobbin in there and a CO2 bottle. You take this whole bag and you throw it to the person in the water. When it hits the water, it opens up into a square cushion, all right, with reflective tape on it, and it's high vis, and the person can float on that. So it's a quick way to get something to somebody in the water that is going to need to be floating on something and some markings around them. The Mom 8. Oh, I'm sorry. There it is. I don't know if you can see that. Okay, so this square on the side of this is called a MOM-8. Stands for Man Overboard Module. You've been on a lot of race boats, you'll see these on there. Basically, with a MOM-8, as the person is going by the boat, okay, that's mounted outboard of the gunnel. You pull the T-handle on the top of it, and out from the bottom of this, out of the bottom, will drop a pylon, much like what's over here in the corner, an inflatable horseshoe, okay? And there's a strobe light on the pylon, there's a whistle on it, and there's a drogue to slow its drift. Okay, so all this apparatus drops in the water, and the idea is as the boat is going by the person, they can grab this stuff and give them some flotation and mark them in the water so you can get the boat back to them and find them. The Dan buoy, which is this. I don't know if you can see me, Sean, can you see me? So this here is an inflatable Dan buoy. It's called an SOS Dan buoy. Okay. This comes in a package. Would you be able to hand me that? The Dan buoy right there? Thank you. I should have it back here. That's my fault. Thanks. So basically what you do is you throw this into the water, and that will inflate into a pylon like that. Okay. So now you're doing a couple of things with that. The person can float on it. You can see it's got two grab handles on the side. They wrap their legs around the pylon and grab the handles. Got a whistle on it. It's got a strobe light on the top and a streamer to give them more visibility in the water, make it easier to find them. So this whole thing gets tossed in the water, and boom, it inflates into that Man Overboard pylon. Now, I had a customer who did something which I thought was pretty slick. Was he mounted one of those AIS units right on the Dan buoy. Okay, now this guy that did this is a former Russian merchant marine. And I think he's been in a couple of dozen Newport Bermuda races. So he thought it would be a really good idea, which like I said, I thought it was brilliant. He attached one of those AIS units to his Dan buoy. So the Dan buoy overboard, thing opens up, strobe lights going, and now you got an AIS signal going back to the boat of where that Dan buoy is. A really simple way, okay, now that you've marked the person in the water, okay, all of these are marking them or giving them flotation, all right, to keep their head above the water. But now you got to get them back to the boat, okay? And one of the misconceptions, especially with power boaters that I run into, is they think you're going to get the boat right to the person in the water, okay? And in most cases, that's a real bad idea. You'd rather get the victim or the person to the boat rather than the boat to the person, okay? If you have a larger vessel, you run the risk of losing sight of the person and running them over, okay? A lot of power boaters think that they're going to just get the person up on the swim ladder or the swim platform and get them back in the boat. Well, not if it's rough and the swim platform is doing this, and you get them underneath that swim platform, and it could be bad news. They could get injured or killed. So the idea is to get the person back to the boat, not the boat to the person. And one way of doing that is something very simple called a throw bag or a heaving line or a throw line. And you can either loop it around your wrist or you can put it around a cleat. The line is coiled up in here, and all you do is throw that line to the person in the water, okay? And then you can haul them back to the boat that way. All right, so it's a floating line. You can get them back to the boat using that. Another real good system is a life sling, okay? Now again, when you get a life sling, okay, it doesn't have any reflective tape, no strobe light, and no whistle on there. So put those items on a life sling. And basically what you do is this bag is mounted on the rail in the stern of the boat. Make sure it's tied on, because I've seen them on boats where they're not tied on, okay? If you don't tie it on, the whole line is going to pay out of there. So what you do is if you can't throw this directly to the person in the water, you pay it off the back like a ski tow line, right? Like a water ski line. Circle the person in the water, okay? And the tighter that circle gets, they'll be able to grab this, okay? Now, I will tell you this. If you're the person putting this on, okay, put it on backwards. If you're in the water, put this on backwards so that the tow point, you're being pulled from behind. not forward. Okay, I did a couple of demos wearing an immersion suit, and the guy that was pulling me back the boat was pulling me too fast, and you'll get a face full of water. So last thing you want to do is the person survive falling out of the boat. You don't want to drown them, getting them back to it. So have them put the life sling on backwards, okay, so that the toe point is back here. Then when you get to the boat, you can turn it around, put it on forwards, and have the lifting point and the toe point up front. Because then what you're going to want to do is you got to get them back in the boat. Okay, so you can get lifting tackle for a life sling that you either can put on a boom or use a halyard and lower it down to them, attach it here, and actually hoist the person back up over the boat. And again, like in the case of a large power boat, it's not a bad idea to have that as a backup. If you can't get the person up on the swim platform, you choose not to use a swim platform because it's rough or heavy drift, you have the choice of being able to haul that person up over the side to get them back into the boat. So that pretty much concludes my presentation. I hope maybe you might have learned something about some of this equipment. You know, like I said, you're not putting yourself in great peril if you don't have all this stuff, but it kind of shows you, you know, for man overboard or, you know, distress signaling, things like that, just things ideas of what you might want to have on board. So thank you very much.
Thanks,
Could you
Mark.
hold on for a minute?
What I'd like to do before we take questions is I'd like to turn it over to Paul Susdak for a little bit to kind of talk about the yacht club for a little bit, and then we'll go back and have the question session. So Paul, if you good to go?
Yeah, I'm good to go.
Excellent, great. Great.
You want me to share my screen?
Oh, no, I got it. I just, let me just do that here.
So first, I'd like to thank Captain Bologna and Landfall Navigation for, you know, spending the time with us today. It was a very informative discussion, and I'm sure he's going to be able to answer a lot of questions after we're done. A few tidbits about RYC. So RYC is located in Perth Amboy, tracing its roots back to 1865. We are a full year sailing club. You know, we start the season in April, late April, early May, sailing, Wednesday night racing, weekends racing, cruising. We have a shared boat program. So for people that are interested in getting involved in sailing but may not want to go ahead and purchase a boat, you know, we have the ability between Colgate 26s, Catalina 25s, for you to go around and sail around Raritan Bay. We offer women's sailing programs, summer sailing classes, certifications. As the weather gets colder, we keep on sailing and we go out and we do frostbiting. That goes from November until late December, early January. And right now we're actually in the process of going through our series for RC Laser. So remote controlled sailboats that we race right off the dock. You know, it's a really good club. We're always looking to, you know, share what we have with other people. So if you're interested in learning more about RYC, at the end of this, you know, hit us up on Facebook Messenger. There's contact us page on the actual website. And, you know, we look forward to hearing from you soon. We do have other events planned in, you know, February, March. So, you know, keep an eye open for us. I know there's folks that found us through Meetup today. I know there's folks that found us through Facebook, Eventbrite. You know, keep your eyes open because we are, you know, we're going to be keeping the events coming here. So Lou, I'll hand it back to you. I know there's some questions on the line here, and the floor is yours.
Okay, and as soon as I found myself to unmute. All right, so thank you. So again, I want to express my appreciation as well. And so why don't we open up the floor for questions and answers? I guess Dawn, that would probably be you to kind of pick up the people, I think.
Yeah, I'm happy to help. In order of their hands coming up, we've got Ephraim and then Jeff.
Thank you. This is Ephraim. No, no, that's okay. That's the apology. Foreign names, I've heard it. And okay, the main thing that I wanted to say is that I took the advice to heart about reading the freaking manual. And unfortunately, the manual is very, very specific. And I'm reading directly from the manual for that unit. That is the SmartFind S20 AIS man overboard device. It will first transmit 18 seconds after operational without any GPS. So while the story is nice, and I'm sure that it got my attention, it doesn't hold water because the device should, and by engineering, and I've got an electrical engineering degree, so it should operate even without the GPS and send it, which is basically what the specs for this device is. So I just wanted to clear this thing up and make sure that I'm reading the right manual, and it makes sense because these are the standards that are worldwide, I believe, for all AIS devices.
Well, you would know better than I if you're an electrical engineer. That's sure. That's certain. Your education is a lot better than mine. But I'm going to go back and read that book again. But what he did specify in that webinar was that he had, for whatever reason, he had to reboot the unit because for some reason they hadn't picked up that signal. But I'll go back and read that again. And you've got my email address, so yeah, I'd like to further follow up on that.
What I'm doing, if somebody wants to share, I'm pointing my camera on the manual, basically on my PC. So this is the SmartFind S20 AIS man overboard. As we can see, you don't need to read a lot in the manual. It says functional. First transmission after 18 seconds, no GPS. So it makes sense because I wouldn't design a device that needs a GPS while it can transmit. It has an antenna, it has a transmitter, and it can transmit the signal that says, hey, somebody is in the water, man is overboard. Forget about where he is. We'll get you where he is once I get the GPS. But the range is, as you pointed, 4 nautical miles, typical, and secondary location, flashing, alarms, etc. But this is the manual. I mean, and you're absolutely right. As an engineer, I can count on one hand the number of manuals that I read in my life because we all don't do read them. But your story kind of piqued my interest on this thing. And I said to myself, okay, I need to check this thing because it's been bugging me because I've been promoting this device in everything that I've been talking and I've been doing safety lectures as well and things like this. I'm a circumnavigator with 26 years of experience sailing my own boat. So I'm just no disrespect, but we need to make sure that all the listeners understand that somebody is designing a good device over there. And while it makes a good thing in the story and it might sell the book, unfortunately, you need to check and validate everything that we present to others.
I'll go back and look at it again. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Great information. The fact that I learned something specifically with the leakage on the inflatable, that was something that I've never heard before. And you know what? I do have 10 years inflatables, and first thing that I'm going to do is get to the boat and check for leakage for 24 hours. I really appreciate the information.
Good, that's terrific. Thank you.
All right, Jeff, you're next.
Hey, thank you very much. I really appreciate the RTFM acronym. I will definitely use it. And I do have a question about tethers. I've been researching the tether situation, and I get a little confused. There's the fixed tethers, the ones that don't have the shock cord, and the other ones that have the shock cord. And I'm just a little confused about when I look in the marketplace and see what's out there. Can you give us a little insight as to maybe some preferences and things that you've seen?
I don't have, this one here. So they do make some non-expanding tethers. All right. Usually what you do with this lead is this is for when you're going around an obstruction. So this is your main one with the expanding, which is what most offshore requirements are with an expanding tether. I do know of some single-handed sailors that are ocean sailors that want a non-expanding tether. And the reason being was the expanding one isn't going to do them any good if they end up overboard. Basically, they're on the boat by themselves, so there's nobody to rescue them. So they wanted a short, non-expanding tether, which you can get. You can make, they make them. But the idea with most of the ones that are double, they use the non-expanding one as you're going around an obstruction. So this would be, this is to your harness. This is your main lead, is the expanding one. And then as you have to make your way around something, you temporarily use a non-expanding, and then, you know, clip the other one on beyond that obstruction and then release the non-expanding. Very few people have I ever heard using a non-expanding tether. Like I said, most of them were people that I experienced that were offshore, single-handed ocean sailors that wanted a non-expanding tether or a child's tether. The child's tethers are not expanding either. So it's just a short piece of line like that.
Hey, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I'm not quite sure if I answered your question, but the majority of the race rules and things like that specify an expanding tether.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Sure, you're welcome.
Okay, do we have any other questions? If you want to raise your hand, or if you don't know how to do that, just unmute yourself and ask.
I have a question. What was the strobe that there was a very small $20 strobe that you pointed out in the beginning? What was the brand on that?
That was the one that was affixed to the life jacket. This one
Yeah.
here.
Yeah,
Aquaspec is who makes that.
Aquaspec. Okay.
Very inexpensive. It's got a 5-year lithium battery. It's SOLAS approved. And what happens with these guys is now if you're going to put an AIS unit or something on the oil inflation tube, now you've lost your spot for your strobe light.
Right.
So what people do is I put that small Aquaspec up on the shoulder.
Right.
Still have
Okay.
a light.
Other question, you keep talking, you show the horseshoe type life jackets. I find that those are uncomfortable to wear. So for my boat, I bought the vest type. Is that a good idea, or do you like the horseshoe ones better once you're in the water?
The standard vest type,
Yeah.
inherently buoyant foam.
Yeah.
Comfort wise, yeah. Yeah, you mean you've got these yoke type?
No, not those. The West Marine, it's like a blue and yellow. It's a
Oh, you're talking like a type 3, like a dinghy vest.
yeah.
Sure. Listen, years ago when I used to do the life jacket conferences, the Coast Guard, and we're going back a lot of years now, the Coast Guard would say, no, you gotta have a type 1 because it rolls you over face up, and that's the only one to use.
Right.
Well, that's why nobody wears them,
Right.
because they're too big and bulky. So
Right.
now the mindset is, listen, any life jacket you're wearing is better than not having one on at all.
Right.
So if you're gonna wear like a dinghy vest on your boat, listen, I'm all for it.
Okay.
It's gonna give you buoyancy. It's gonna float you, keep your head above water, and you can move around on the boat if that's what you prefer. Then good.
Right. Okay. I guess I should get some reflective tape and put it on those too. I don't think they have it come with it.
Yeah, because that a lot of we sell a lot of dinghy vests. They've got not a whole lot of reflective material on them. Some of them may
Right.
have a little bit of reflective piping.
Right.
But the other thing about reflective tape too, and it's the same thing with a strobe light I failed to mention, is in the daylight, some of these LED strobes and that reflective tape, is going to act like a mirror. So, anything that makes you more visible in the water, I'm all for it. Even if it's some reflective tape on there and it's daylight and that reflective tape moves the right way, and now I can see in the water, all the better.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
What was that throwable type for?
This is called a throw raft.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, and again, you can manually inflate it if you want and then throw it. But the idea is, especially in the wind. All right, sometimes if it's real windy, it's hard to get like a seat cushion to somebody. The wind catches it, or a horseshoe. The wind may catch it and blow it off of where you want it to go. This thing you can, with a pretty good degree of accuracy, get it pretty close to the person in the water because it's got some weight to it.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
That last throwaway, does it contain what we call a sea anchor? Just to
No,
make sure that it won't be blown?
no,
Because there are
that,
some.
yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, no, but that one doesn't have a drogue or a sea anchor. That one, the person's just gonna float on it and they're gonna be at the wind or current's discretion.
Yeah, given the situation, I would urge the listener basically to get one that has a drogue in it, because then you could potentially at least keep it within close proximity and the wind is not going to take it totally away.
To be honest with you, I don't see why you couldn't add one to it. I would think there's probably enough room in there that Cal is the name of the company, or Jim Bowie makes a small drogue that you could probably tie it, you could get it in there and tie it on. And then complete, get that effect that you wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, all I know is that I researched the market and I know that there is somebody in the market that makes one with a drogue. I just want the people to know, because usually RTFM, right? I mean, if you're not really looking into it, you're basically relying, hey, I saw it in this safety, the expert said, buy it, I'll go and I buy it. And now you have a disadvantage that can be solved if you had researched it really thoroughly, understood what's in there,
Sure.
and tested it perhaps.
Sure, and if you're searching for one online, I would search for, a type 4 throwable with a drogue, with an included drogue.
All right. If we have any more questions?
I do have a question. This is Pete.
Hey, Pete.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
I really enjoyed this whole presentation. It was very educational, and I actually just grabbed my Finlock deck vest and popped it open, and my CO2 canister was corroded. And I looked at some dates, and I'm not going to mention what the dates are. But I had a couple things that I wanted to mention regarding tethers, because I've spent some time with them, and I actually made my own tether maybe 10 years ago when I wasn't able to find one on the market that I liked. So in the presentation, you had mentioned you would use the term snap shackle, and the tethers that I was seeing 10, 15 years ago, they had snap shackles, but they were true snap shackles, meaning they were not load release for whatever reason. Once they were put under some tension, you weren't able to pop them, which was a big concern of mine. That was one of the reasons why I decided to make my own, where I used a real load release snap shackle so that it would pop in the event I was in a compromised position. And then getting back to the reason for having a short tether and a long tether, most of the time I'm on my short tether, and that would be because when it's really rough out, so that if I do get if a wave hits me or something, I feel like I'm not going to go over the lifelines, because the jack line is going to stretch. And, that long tether is long enough where you could get launched and you could be hanging on the outside of the boat, kind of. But anyway, that was, I would just warn anybody that has a load release, or I'm sorry, that has a tether that's existing. I would make it a point to, hook it up to something and put some pressure on it, and then see if you're able to trip it. Because as I said, I was very disappointed with the shackles that looked as though they would release for you, but really, didn't have that feature.
So all those points are well taken. I understand the point of not wanting to have a tether that's long enough to let you out of the boat, really, let you over the side. One of the things I want to say, it's a little bit sort of a funny story. I don't know if you can see can you see that tether bar here?
Yeah.
All right. So the former owner of this company passed away several years ago. My mentor made this with the pad eyes to bring the show, primarily pre-COVID. And I had a fellow one day at the Annapolis Boat Show. I usually say this when I do these seminars live, and he actually did that. All right. the problem was he pulled this thing out at arm's length and his wife was standing over here. And he let the snap shackle go and he missed her mouth by about that much. So, yeah, I mean, do it, you know, if you want to put a strain on it, I'm telling you, it'll let go. But just don't do it with somebody else standing around you, because I'll tell you, the look that she gave him was priceless. But it was, you know, on his part, it was kind of dumb. He said, look there, it'll release under a load. And it went right by her face. Oh, man. But I haven't, if it's happened, I haven't heard of any of those not releasing under a load. But again, I'm not an engineer, so I didn't, you know, test it.
Right. Well, all I was trying to point out was that, you know, on sailboats, you have like regular snap shackles that are not designed to release under load.
Oh, right, right.
And then you also have load release snap shackles, like if you're going to trip the guy or something like that, where, you know, there's thousands of pounds of pressure on it and you're able to trip it out with, you know, easily.
Right. And I'd have to look up the spec on that, but I have pulled on those and they open up.
They probably changed it in the last 10 to 15 years. As I said, I'm a little dated here with, you know,
well, by the sounds of that two bottle and that spin lock, I think maybe we are a little dated.
Yeah, well, that's true. But I would just be careful, because I know that they were selling tethers 10 to 15 years ago. Anybody that's got some gear that's a little older, you know, just make sure that, you know, you have a shackle that is going to do what you expect that it's going to do. That's all.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Thanks a lot for your for all your help. I really I learned a lot, and you covered things very well. And I'll make sure that I you know, use your company when I need to do some rearming, which is going to happen right away.
Yeah, one thing I failed to mention too is now, you know, with COVID, I work from home a lot. But if you've got questions on this stuff, you should have my contact information. If not, you know, you call me or email me if you're trying to put your spin lock back together and, you know, you have questions or something, you know, just shoot me an email, give me a call.
Very good. I will. Thanks again for taking the time with us.
Oh, my pleasure.
All right.
It looks like we have another question from Greg and then Dennis.
Yes, my question's about tethers. You know, I've got a nylon tether that's meant to be mounted on deck. Is that recommended nowadays, or is there new guidance?
Tether or jack line?
I'm sorry, jack line.
Yeah, so one of the issues that I see with jack lines are people leave them out and they get UV'd out a lot. You know, especially if you're in southern climates where they're getting beat on by the sun. But that's primarily, you know, this is basically what they're using. You know, get a dog down to the deck nice and tight so it doesn't have too much give. You know, less give the better. Again, if you're, as that other gentleman was saying, if you know, if you've got a lot of give, it may allow you to get out of the boat or stretch. So, you know, some of these have a buckle on them that you can tighten it down and get it very tight to the deck. But this is primarily what people are using. Our rigging department does do custom jack lines, but for the most part, people are using the pre-cut jack lines on the boat. It's just the webbing material.
Right, it's similar to what I have, but
Yeah.
I saw something recently about mentioning using something less stretchy and having it attached to the rigging to keep it higher off the deck. So if you do go flying, that you're less likely to go all the way into the water.
That I wasn't aware of. I'm not aware of having a jack line elevated off the deck.
Okay.
That's
Thanks.
something I'll have to look into.
Thank you.
Sure.
Great presentation. Is the shop open in Stamford?
Yeah, we're open.
Okay. All right. Thanks. That's all.
Sure.
Very good presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, if we have no more questions, thank you very much, Captain Mark. I really appreciate you doing this presentation. It was wonderful.
My pleasure. Like I said, it's a lot easier to do it like this than to drive down to Perth Amboy.
I know, right? Packing up. But thank you for your support. I appreciate it. And thank you everyone else for for tuning in this morning. And Dawn, thank you for helping to run it, as well as Paul and Adam. I appreciate all your help. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks for having.
Thank you, Raritan Yacht Club and Landfall. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Oh, I didn't even mention. Thank you, Sowanica, for joining us. That's a great club you guys have up there.
Thank you, Captain Mark. Bye, guys.
Oh, my pleasure. Take care.
Bye-bye.